Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's discussion marking the 10th anniversary of MIDiA's Global Music Forecast Report. MIDiA's music forecast has become a cornerstone of the industry, valued for its precision, detailed, and insightful analysis. In this milestone year, we'll delve deeper into the report's creation process, gaining first-hand perspective from our experts, and we'll also offer a glimpse into the key insights from the report. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Mark Mulligan, Tatiana Sirisano, and Perry Gresham to share their expertise and insights. So Mark, what are some of the big things that jumped out to you from the model this year?
So there's a couple of things jump out. First of all, 2023 was a really good year. When the rest of the economy was really quite struggling, the recorded music market grew strongly, hitting just under $62 billion worth of revenue. So, really good, sizable year. I think we can finally stop talking about post-pandemic. This is just how growth is now. And the market's going to grow to $100 billion by 2031 when you factor in all the new revenue streams like expanded rights, non-DSP, etc. Sounds like a very round, perfect figure. We got there accidentally. We didn't aim for it. That's just where all of those different revenue streams add up to. Another thing is China becomes the world's second biggest market by 2031. Really beginning to become a major power player. And the third one is we did a huge amount of work around ARPU in this year's model. There's a lot of talk about it because we're beginning to see price increases, etc. But you can't simply just say, well, let's just factor in $1 or $2 worth of price increase and just whack that on top. It's a lot more work than that because it has impacts on how many people remain subscribed, how many, what the acquisition rates, etc. are. So those are probably the three big things: hitting $100 billion. China becoming number two, and then lots of really interesting work around ARPU.
Perry, ARPU and price increases are the words on everyone's lips. So how did we go about factoring these into this year's forecast?
So, yeah, with price increases becoming standardized, it's more important than ever to take a comprehensive approach to ARPU and look at not just the increased price and therefore the fact that subscribers will pay more, but also the effects on churn rates, the effects on subscriber acquisition. And we need to consider all of these factors that are related to the price rises alongside the factors we would normally consider when talking about ARPU. So, whether that's the different type of plan that someone might be on, a family plan, and therein how many subscribers there are per subscription, whether it is a student plan or a telco bundle. All of these things affect ARPU, and shifts in the numbers for each of those also further affect ARPU. So this year we've also looked at the effect of super premium and the idea that there may be a higher tier of Spotify which would push up ARPU for the most engaged consumers. And all of these factors that I've talked about, they differ by region. So it's really important to take a regional approach and to consider the ARPU variations because of that.
Thanks, Perry. And I'm coming to you now, Tati. So, of course, streaming is where the big money is. But could you talk a bit about where else the music industry is beginning to build?
Sure, Sion. So as you kind of mentioned, streaming is still the heart of industry revenue, but it's increasingly just one part of a much more diversified revenue portfolio where, streaming was all about monetizing consumption. But as that growth starts to slow down, now the industry is looking more to monetize fandom. And, anyone listening, I'm sure, has been aware of all of the different press releases and statements coming from everyone from the major labels to the streaming services about how they're going after the super fans. So this year, we actually saw some of the first indications of the rise of a sort of fan economy alongside the streaming one. And there's three key categories to consider there. There's non-DSP streaming, which is revenues from social platforms, fitness, etc. Expanded rights, which is merch, branding, things like that. And then finally physical, which, of course, is selling vinyl, CDs, and other physical formats to the super fans. Now, not all three of those will grow at the same rate. And we have a lot of information in the full report about how they will kind of have different growth rates. But the bottom line is that by 2031, those three segments together will actually make up just over a quarter of label trade revenues, which is, of course, a pretty big shift from the much more streaming-driven focus of the past 10 years.
Thank you, Tati. And I'm coming to you now, Mark. There are a lot of new components to this year's forecast. Why is that?
Quite simply because the industry is changing. It's changing its culture, it's changing its business. You've probably seen some work we've done around the bifurcation of the industry, and I think a lot of what we're looking at really plays into this. You can't measure the future of the music business simply by forecasting just what have been the traditional revenues. When, like Tati was saying, things like expanded rights, non-DSP, etc. These things are what are relatively small at the moment, but really represent the foundations for what tomorrow's business is going to be. So there may be no facts about the future, but what we can be confident about is one thing: it won't simply be a bigger, shinier version of today.
So Perry, what do we do to ensure our numbers can reflect these industry changing concepts?
We've got a number of tools and techniques which we use to produce really accurate forecasts. And our forecast for 2023 that we produced last year ended up being just 0.05% away from the actual. One of our core techniques is scorecard methodology. And scorecard methodology lets us combine both quant, hard data, with qualitative concepts and market trends. So we can combine things like the change in consumer behavior with the effect of inflation, with how subscriptions might depress revenues in other parts of the industry. And this year, we're taking an even more elaborate approach than usual. We've got multi tiered scorecards. So we have scorecards for the categories, whether that be subscribers or sync or performance, all of these. Scorecards for the countries, and then combined scorecards. So looking at subscribers by country. And we're hoping that this approach will allow us to maintain and maybe even improve that level of accuracy.
Change seems to be the running theme here. Tati, where is all of this taking us?
You're definitely right about that, Sion. What we're starting to see the early signs of is a bifurcation of the music industry into what we think will ultimately be two parallel consumer worlds. So on one side of the equation, we have the sort of streaming driven, passive listening side of things, which is more where the traditional industry has always been focused. And on the other side, we have this really fan focused blurring of the line between creator consumer side of the industry that's building more on social platforms that enable that kind of connection. And we're seeing that that side of the industry is increasingly attracting more of this next generation of both creators who are finding that streaming isn't necessarily serving their needs, and fans who really want to engage with the music that they're fans of rather than just passively consume it. So we don't see these two sides of the industry, one overtaking the other, but more so in the forecast period, we see them sort of running in parallel. But of course, there is a risk here for the traditional side of the industry, which is that if we sort of ignore that this is happening and lean much further back into the passive listening and the traditional streaming driven side of things, then that new generation of creators and their fans are going to take their fandom and scenes and culture and all of these things that the future of the industry is supposed to be built around with them. And that's increasingly on these social platforms rather than on streaming. Now we have a bifurcation scenario in the forecast report, which you can read more about. But we also have a bifurcation theory report separate to this, which gets much deeper into the nitty gritty of all of that.
Thank you so much, Mark, Tati, and Perry, for sharing your insights. And if you've watched this far, I also want to say thank you to you for watching. If you want to learn more, we invite you to download the free music forecast summary report available right below this video. And if you want to delve into the full report, that will also be available right below this video. We trust that this discussion has been valuable to you, and as always, please feel free to reach out to our team if you have any further questions. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in our next discussion.